Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of High Strangeness. Tonight, my guest is Jeff Finup. He is an author, speaker, researcher, and explorer celebrated for his deep dive into the rich folklore of Wisconsin. Ooh, you know I love Wisconsin. As the creator of Badgerland Legends and co-host of Wisconsin Legends podcast, Jeff brings a unique blend of storytelling and investigation to the mysteries of the Badger State. His engaging presentations have earned him invitations to speak at paranormal conferences, banquets, festivals, and conventions, where he captivates audiences with tales of the unknown, forgotten history, and local legends. I almost got through it without a mess up. Oh my gosh, I messed up right at the end. I've never not messed up, Jeff. But, buddy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for the kind introduction.
Yeah. How have you been, pal? We were just talking prior to hitting the record button that we both experienced a little bit of a snow blast.
Yeah, it's unpredictable. Late winter, early spring in Wisconsin can bring anything from blizzards to 70-degree days to last year in February, we had a tornado. So you never know what you're going to get. It just adds to the lore of Wisconsin and its overall strangeness.
Exactly, it sure does. Now, let me ask you a very important question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It's a snowy evening in Wisconsin. You know, you don't want to go out. No one's going to go out for dinner. What are you making for dinner that night? What's a cozy, comfort meal on a winter's night for you?
You know what? I'm a big fan of chili, and I know there's a lot of debate around chili, if it's bean or no bean. I put 3 different types of beans in my chili.
I do too. Kidney, black, and pinto.
Kidney, northern.
I love a northern
black.
Bean.
Yeah,
love it. I mean, look, I could write poetry about a northern bean. I've become a dried bean guy in my old age, where I'm soaking the beans overnight. Well, it's more cost effective, less sodium, and I have to admit, it does taste better. But when I'm making a chili, I'm going to go canned.
Yeah, it got to, just for the simplicity of it. Popping up and keep a few cans, hose them off in the sink, and throw them in the chili.
Jeff, have you ever tried putting adobo peppers in your chili?
I have not, but I do like adobo on chicken.
Would you do me a favor one day, and I'm not saying it has to be this winter season, will you try putting a small can of adobo peppers in your chili?
So like the Chipotle's and adobo sauce, is that what you're talking about?
You nailed it. That's it.
All right.
That's the one. I'm telling you, you will never go back. The smokiness that adds to it.
I'm a big fan. I always keep a couple cans around just in case I get squirrely and want to do something Mexican. Yeah.
Well, you can always make a chicken tinga taco, with if you have adobo chilies, you can do so much with your life. Yeah, it's really when people say, have those earthquake kits or emergency kits, have your water, have your MREs, your dry food, but have some cans of adobo chilies.
Absolutely. Folks, keeps the plumbing working well too as well.
It does. I'm saying it does things for your life that are positive.
That's all right.
Positive. I love it. Right. I love them. Buddy, I want to ask you this question. I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times. But how did you get into the strange and unusual? Is this like a thing you had growing up?
Yes, it's been a lifelong fascination. Always been interested kind of in the subject of the unknown. And growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, you always had those compelling Time Life books, commercials on in every commercial break. And you were learning about crop circles and UFOs and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. And I think it really started for me when I was 8. And my mom brought home a book from the library called Wisconsin Lore. On the inside, it said something to the fact of Wisconsin, if the yarns are any indication, has more ghosts per square mile than any place in the nation. And that really captivated me. Yeah. And I think it, as I've grown with that, I thought maybe it just meant that there was a lot of ghosts. But specifically, the author says, if the yarns meaning the stories, the lore of the land. And I think now, as a writer and kind of a custodian and a curator of this stuff, I think that resonates more with me, to be the collective stories of Wisconsin really inform some
You,
of the spookiness.
you are a person after my own heart because we will never be able to prove any of these stories. And that at a certain point is not really what it's about for me. It is the stories that are important. And I couldn't agree with you more. And first off, thank you for preserving this stuff. Like and I really mean it. Like I think people who take the preservation of these stories and documenting them, keeping them safe and sharing them are doing a really important cultural like gift to the world.
Yeah, and I've had just a compendium to pull from. I remember when I first got into this stuff, I started collecting these books probably in my early 20s, and I probably amassed a collection of like 3 or 4 books. And I thought, oh, this has to be, the compiled
Yeah.
lore of Wisconsin. Little did I know I hadn't even come close to scratching the very tip of the iceberg on this stuff. And we talked in the pre-show about Linda Godfrey and
Oh,
her
yeah.
contributions to the field, and a friend and former show guest Chad Lewis, and
Oh,
what
yeah.
he's really done to document this stuff. And Chad gets out in the field and actually puts boots on the ground and collects these stories from the people who've experienced strange stuff and has been able to preserve and pass down the lore. So I feel like with my Instagram account, Badgerland Legends, I've really been able to kind of transmit it in a new and novel way, and kind of preserve that and kind of pass along that more of a digital campfire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's been, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it's like, well, I think it's a great way to make people excited that, like, hey, like, not only is Wisconsin weird, but the area you live might be weird too. And maybe you can document this stuff, and maybe you should document this stuff. And then maybe we can exchange stories and like, whoa, there's some commonalities here. Like all of a sudden, like, this is how we take a step forward in this stuff, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look, and the homogenization of American culture, it serves a purpose. But I've really always been a fan of regionality.
Mm-hmm.
Going to a different part of the country, whether it's Omaha, Nebraska,
Yeah.
going to New Orleans and partaking in their festivities, or going out to California and seeing some of the stuff out there, and doing walking tours, and learning about what happened at this place, who lived here, what did they do, what impact did they have on society, and then be able to go back to your hometown and really discover what is lying just beneath the surface of
Yes.
our reality. What's the history of the place?
Right.
And that's really been the thing that's ignited and kind of kept me fed over the past 5 years of doing the blog.
Yeah. Look, I want to ask you this question. Like, did you kind of start off? Oh, I mean, it almost sounds like you did. You might have answered that question already because you got that book of Wisconsin lore.
Yeah.
But so, like, was your regionality in like your kind of the locale, like in your immediate vicinity, always kind of your focus, or have you like branched out and like then come back full circle back to Wisconsin, or has it always been pretty steady where your focus has been Wisconsin?
I think as I grew up, it was just learning, collecting books about the ghosts and everything, more of a national or even international, learning about stuff, some historic hauntings, whether they're in England, learning about crop circles over there, learning about Stonehenge, learning about the Loch Ness monster. But then that kind of led me back home to say, like, well, what interesting stuff do we have here? And I think that was kind of the thing, is like, what is special about my place, and what how do I fit in?
Yeah.
And what's the importance of place?
Yeah.
I think has been a really important question for me to continue to explore.
I am such a big believer of the magic of place. And I mean that in like the widest sense, like, that every place has their own weirdness, but also even just like, like for instance, going to Bray Road outside of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and experiencing where people were having these sightings of the Beast of Bray Road, but standing there by a cornfield, to a lot of people would seem pretty boring.
Mhm.
However, to me, when you know the lore, you know the history, you know the stories,
Mhm.
it is magical to me, Jeff.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to actually spend the night on Bowers Road, which is
Wow.
intersects with Bray Road. One of my friends actually grew up next to where Lee Hample's farm is today, and his dad still lives on the property. Although he or his brother, they haven't really had any experiences.
Mm,
It seems like something's going on
yeah,
around there, and I got to walk the fields at night and pitch my tent there, and
that's amazing.
pretty much get woken up by a monsoon at about 3 in the morning. I'd have to pack up my tent really quick and just throw it
Yeah,
in the back of my truck. But
yeah,
it was definitely an experience, and being able to visit with Lee Hample, kind of the custodian
yeah.
of the Bray Road lore
Hmm.
going forward, and seeing his collection of evidence, as in some of the cast footprints, or all of the trail cam footage, or witness testimony that he's collected.
Yeah,
It was really, really a cool experience.
absolutely. My friend Eric Jeske and I we took his mother to go do a tour. It was actually, I think it was on the day they were celebrating their Beast of Bray Road. We saw some lectures at the local library. It was
Yep,
wonderful. Then we
absolutely.
went to the property and we did he showed us some videos and trail cam
Mhm.
stuff. And I have to tell you that I was kind of blown away by some of the stuff I was seeing.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, if this guy faked it, he's a pretty talented CGI artist.
yeah,
But he's a farmer, so I mean,
and if you meet Lee Hample, you're like, he's not going to pull the wool over my eyes. It's like he's
yeah,
captured what he captured.
I think
What the
so.
explanation is, that's left to interpretation.
Absolutely.
But
I would agree. I would have to
yeah,
agree. But it's obviously, folks, it's a lovely little tour. Highly recommend it.
yeah. So did you do the whole hay wagon around the
You
fields
better
there?
believe I
All
did.
right,
Yeah, the
yeah,
full experience, man. And yeah, and then we went to a lovely little taco truck in Delavan. It was great. It was a great day. I
lovely.
love that area so much. I think it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, between Delavan, Lake Geneva, even up into Whitewater, kind of spooky all over.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna, since you just brought up Whitewater, let me
Mhm.
segue into some of the weirdness of Wisconsin because I last summer visited Whitewater because I wanted to go see the Witch's Tower.
Yep.
And then I went to drive by the area, even though the building was not still standing. I went to drive by at least that little corner of where the first spiritualist school was.
Morse Pratt Institute. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about Whitewater and the Morse Pratt Institute? Because I mean, this is significant. If you're,
So you mentioned the Witch's Tower,
Mhm.
which is the kind of the nickname for the main water tower in Starren Park in Whitewater. So in 1888, Morris Pratt was actually gifted a large endowment by I believe it was a lady who had used psychic divination to find her husband, or I don't remember the exact details, but to find a large deposit of lead in Upper Michigan. And she donated a large sum of money to Morris Pratt to start a spiritualist school right there in Whitewater, Wisconsin. Now, you think Whitewater, Wisconsin, probably mostly settled by Lutherans and Catholics of the time. And now you have this rise of spiritualism after the Civil War in America. A lot of people wanted to make contact with their loved ones, and they resorted to spiritualism to do so. So he got this endowment and he started the school, and the locals, they called it the Spook Temple because they thought it was a little bit spooky. And
Yeah.
then a lot of lore grew up around that temple, and people thought there were witches in their
Hmm.
midst, and they even gave the nickname Second Salem. And now if
Yeah,
you
that's
you
right.
visit Whitewater today, there is a Second Salem brewery who brews specific beers and markets them with the local lore. So there is a Beast of Bray Road. I believe that's an ale. So when you get back to Wisconsin, you'll have to stop in at Second Salem
Done.
and pick up. Um, and they have a witch's brew with the witch's tower on there, and
Amazing.
I love it when local companies can kind of cash in on carrying that folklore
Yes.
forward, because it belongs to the community. And if you can make a buck by spreading it, you got my endorsement for sure.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I love that. I think every community should celebrate their local cryptid or UFO sighting, whatever it is. It's wonderful.
And just in a few months, we're gearing up to go to Rhinelander for the annual Hodag Heritage Fest, where they celebrate the beast, the Hodag. And if you've been to Rhinelander, the whole town is dedicated to it. They have statues at every public facility. Everybody's got a Hodag on their sign. The team mascot's a Hodag. My friend Ben has the Hodag store. That's what it's called, because you go in there. His dad started an antique store some time ago, and he kind of grew up in that. And then he kind of took a little corner of the store and started marketing his Hodag stuff, kind of set up his Hodag stuff. And then the Hodag stuff just took off and took up half the store, and now pretty much cleared out all of the antiques. So now it is just the Hodag store, and it is a must stop when anybody's in Rhinelander. And you got to say hi to Ben, because a lot of times he'll have his hair colored green. He'll have his tie dye.
I think I've met Ben.
Ben's a great guy.
Does he have like a green Hodag van and like play like so I was at this event in Iowa last September, the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which is great. And I think every year someone representing the Hodag situation is always there with like a green Hodag van and like a up tent playing like this Hodag song.
Ben's a great guy. He really gets into it. He loves the lore. He loves the Hodag, and him and his best friend Carrie Bladern of the Rhinelander Logging Museum, they actually started or rebooted the Hodag Heritage Fest a few years ago.
Beautiful.
And they kind of, so when most people think of, I'm going to Hodag this weekend, it is a country music festival that started in the 70s there, and it attracted a lot of up and coming country music artists, but it really kind of overshadows the cryptid. So they wanted to have an event based solely on that cryptid, the Hodag of lumberjacking lore, which started right there in Rhinelander. So they're kind of carrying that lore and that tradition forward with that festival.
That's a town that gets it, man.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You know, like
it's right up there with Point Pleasant with the Mothman. So Rhinelanders really tapped into it. They've embraced it. They've garnered a lot of tourism because of the beast.
They're going to get me. They're going to get me. I'm going to make a special trip probably this summer. How far away is that? Is that like in the central? Is that central Wisconsin?
It's northern Wisconsin. So if Madison's kind of a main hub, because it's south central. Right. So it takes me from Madison only about 3 hours to get to Rhinelander. So it's not far. It's not bad at all.
Is that by any chance close to Eagle Creek?
Eagle River?
Eagle River. I'm sorry. Eagle River.
Yeah, it's within an hour. Yeah.
Oh, so I could kill two birds right there.
You can go up to Eagle River, grab your intergalactic flapjack, and then go down to the Hodag store.
That's a great day.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's objectively a great day, folks.
And then on your way back, you can pay your respects to Ray Palmer in Amherst.
Absolutely.
And that's just right off of Highway 51. Oh. And then while you're on Highway 51, you can stop off in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, which is only 20 minutes from my hometown. And Plainfield is the home of the butcher of Plainfield, Mr. Ed Gein.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's buried. So if you are heading north on highway, it's 3951. You're just south of Stevens Point, kind of the main I would say central hub of the state, Stevens Point. Right before you get there, if you look and you know where to look, you can almost see where Ed Gein is buried. Now his gravestone has actually been removed because people would come to the gravestone and they would chip off of a piece, and then they would have their little memento of Ed Gein's gravestone. So
have fun with that, people.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Well, in the year 2000, somebody stole it. It actually ended up in Seattle, and it showed up on some kind of heavy metal blog.
Sorry to laugh, but
Somehow the authorities were able to track that gravestone down, and it was sent back to Plainfield, and now it is in an undisclosed location somewhere in Washera County, which is the county of Plainfield. And so somebody has that in their basement. So if you go to that Plainfield cemetery, please tread lightly. The locals are very protective of the Ed Gein stuff. They don't. It's kind of a stain on the town.
Yeah,
so
it's not a great.
They don't want to talk. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
but you can find Augusta Gein's grave. That was his mother. Yep, kind of the inspiration for Psycho, Ed Gein, and Ed's brother, which some people think that Ed murdered. Well, right in between the two graves, there is a divot there. That's where Ed Gein's grave was. Now, right in front of that, that kind of missing tooth is a little indentation. Well, the grave being gone hasn't stopped people from actually going and digging in the dirt and taking like a little vial or test tube of Gein grave dirt.
You know, Jeff, I'm discovering there's a lot of sick puppies out there.
There are a ton of sick puppies, and unfortunately, a lot of them came from Wisconsin.
Well, they are everywhere, but Wisconsin has a couple notable ones, don't they?
Yes.
In case the listeners don't know, and we don't cover a lot of true crime here, but like Ed Gein was a prolific serial killer in the 60s? Was it 50s?
So it would have been the 40s and the 50s.
How about you? Yeah, can you give a thumbnail on Ed Gein?
So Ed Gein, as far as a prolific serial killer, he only has 2 known killings. One was a tavern owner that crossed him, and the other was a hardware store owner who set him off. And what he is mostly known for is his grave robbing prowess. So he would go to 2 different cemeteries near Plainfield and exhume freshly buried bodies. And Ed, he was kind of a crafty guy, and he would make some kind of macabre things. So you've seen the Leatherface movies. That was an inspiration from Ed.
Yeah.
He liked lampshades. Some people said that he had cereal bowls.
God.
Some say that he was cannibalistic, but I guess that is kind of disputed. But that's what he's known for is the ghoul.
Yeah, he would make art with like human remains. Yeah, like
yes,
not. Yeah, I mean, like, look, he had problems. And,
that's an understatement. But his impact on popular culture cannot be undersold.
Massive.
The movie Psycho, that was directly inspired by him, and that was written by the novel was written by Robert Bloch, who was in Washera County at the time when the murders happened. So he went into overdrive and wrote the novel, and just upon releasing that novel, Alfred Hitchcock, he came knocking and secured the movie rights. So it wasn't just a couple of years after all this heinous shit went down that the movie Psycho came out, and Psycho really transformed that genre. That was the real first slasher movie.
Yeah. And like a smart horror movie, you know, like it was not it wasn't a drive. It wasn't a drive-in. It was made by like one of the cinema classic directors. So like, I didn't know that about Psycho because I'd always like heard about Ed Gein being the inspiration for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which you can see the similarities. But Psycho, I didn't know. That is fascinating. Wow.
Norman Bates was a kind of a composite character.
Right. Oh my God. It's a lot to grapple with right there.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, I'm sure you've heard of Devil's Lake.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places in the state.
Right. Now, what I know, I know some things about Devil's Lake. I know that there's ancient, like, indigenous people lore about like a kind of a lake monster and other weird stuff. And then I've heard that there's Bigfoot sightings there. And then I've also heard that Michael Bertio, a magician from Chicago, used to come there and do rituals with like his other practitioners of his, brand of magic back in the 70s and 80s. What do you know about Devil's Lake?
So Devil's Lake It is Wisconsin's most frequented state park. I believe like 2 million people pass through Devil's Lake on any given year. And it's no wonder if you go there, it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
It's a small little lake. It's a no-wake lake, so you can, rent a kayak or a paddleboard or canoe and really enjoy your day on the small lake. It's only about 64 feet deep. When I was growing up, I was told that it was called Devil's Lake because it was actually a hole to hell and it was a bottomless pit, which really stuck with me. I hadn't heard that one. So I'm not sure if that was just made up around a campfire at a Boy Scout jamboree. We'd go there every year during Boy Scouts and do a hike around the lake and pitch our tents, and really a lot of fond memories at Devil's Lake. And being where I am in Madison, it's within an hour drive to Devil's Lake, and absolutely stunning, beautiful, craggy quartzite bluffs. And that's kind of where the high strangeness starts. Yeah. So you asked about Mr. Berteau.
Yeah.
So it is rumored that the notable Chicago occultist Michael Berteau and a group of Crowleyan sex magicians, sorcerers, they performed rituals to evoke H.P. Lovecraft's Deep Ones at 3 Sauk County lakes, including Devil's Lake, most notably.
I love it.
So it's unclear whether they evoked anything through any of those 3 lakes, but the lore continues. And, a lot of times these chaos magicians, they'll have a way of kind of disrupting the fabric of time and space. So there has always been stories of lake monsters within Devil's Lakes, old Indian accounts of moonlit paddle or moonlit hunting parties going out on the placid water, looking for those nocturnal animals that gather around the shore at sundown, and different monsters coming up and submerging the canoes and dragging them to their depths. One of the oldest stories is actually called The Legend of Devil's Lake, and that goes to a ancient battle between thunderbirds and these lake monsters, these sea serpents.
Wow.
That inhabited. And now it's said that the thunderbirds, they reigned victorious, dropping, picking up boulders from the top of the bluffs and hurling them into the depths. And of course, those sea monsters hurling them right back at those thunderbirds. And there's actually a piece of composed music called The Legend of Devil's Lake, which is great. It's actually a lot of the band concerts feature that, especially in the center part of the state, the Legend of Devil's Lake. So hit that up. I'm not sure if it's on Spotify, but I know it's on YouTube.
I will put a link to that in the show notes, no doubt.
Definitely. And so that's one of the most ancient legends kind of passed down through oral history. And just that area of the state is probably the oldest inhabited store of the lake. They suggest that 500 generations of people have lived in that area. There's a Natural Bridge State Park that is just down the street from Devil's Lake, where I guess that's the oldest habitation site in Wisconsin, where people lived and then kind of grew around that lake. So it's a really special place, and it's right on this, what they call a terminal moraine, where the glaciers kind of ground their way through Wisconsin. So if you look at a map, especially a topographical map, you'll see the southwest side of the state. It's all craggy, and there's lots of outcroppings, and there's lots of variation in terrain. There's what they call coulees and ridges and valleys. But as you get into the north and the east, it is the typical pastoral dairyland that you think of in Wisconsin, the rolling hills, the dairy fields, the woods. But it's right on that intersection, or that terminal moraine of where that glacier ground through is. That's where Devil's Lake resides. And that kind of liminal area really opens up a lot of lore. And
well, it's definitely very liminal.
A liminal place. Maybe it's a window area, as John Keel would call it.
Right. Well, and also, I was, and I don't know this to be a fact. I know Wisconsin has the highest concentration of mounds
Hmm.
in the United States in the lower 48. But I also heard that just southern Wisconsin alone
Hmm.
has more concentration of mounds at one time, at least. And
Yeah.
I've been to Atsalon, which was honestly one of the most impressive things I've seen in a long
Yeah.
time. Which it's a giant, kind of. It was like a sister. They think it was like a sister city almost to Cahokia in
Yeah, a lot of
Illinois.
people think it was an offshoot where the Cahokian civilization, they would have come up the Mississippi River and then over through, I believe it's the, I can't remember if it was the St. Croix or what river it is
Hmm.
that goes right past Astalon. So that is also one of Wisconsin's oldest still preserved heritage site. It was really the first city in Wisconsin was
Yeah,
Astalon, and they thought that up to 600 people lived there at one time.
amazing.
These woodland Indians, and when you saw it, they had the vertical stanchions, what they call the I can't remember the exact word for it, but they're like barriers. And some people think, okay, that's where they held cattle, or some people think that they may have used it for hunting and
Right.
like flushed deer into that area and kind of created a kill zone. And then within that area are two stepped pyramids or step mounds, and then on top of those is where the chiefs lived or the royalty of the area lived, and it's a really great site. It's also a state park, so you can
Yeah.
visit there pretty much
Yeah.
any day of the year from sunup to sundown. And I actually got to visit there for the solstice and
Oh,
kind of enjoy the longest day of the year on
amazing.
top of one of those mountains. So
Oh, hell yeah. That's
yeah,
like, awesome. You're doing it right.
yeah,
I,
trying to, yeah,
I was so, because my buddy Eric and I, we went and saw Cahokia and became obsessed with Cahokia. It's,
yeah.
it's tragic that like that's not something we're taught in school. That like
Oh man,
rarely, almost so many people in the Midwest don't even know about it. Yet, world archaeologists and anthropologists are like, this is one of the most important like earthwork structures in the
Mhm.
entire world. But
Yeah.
here we just don't like whatever.
Yeah, so we talk about the so like that's the mound builders of the Mississippi Valley
Yeah, yeah.
right there, and then stretching like into the Ohio Valley, they have like the Hopewell and the Adena,
Hmm.
and they had like some kind of star fort or circular fort type mounds where specifically in central and southern Wisconsin, they did effigy mounds, and the effigy
Yes.
mounds depicted pretty much their cosmology. So whether it was the thunderbird, woodland animals like deer, bear,
Yeah.
turtles, anything. And then they have the depictions of the underworld, which
Hmm.
are the water panthers. So they believe that of these underwater cat-like aquatic creatures
Amazing.
right there.
I
And there is one very special place. It is on the um, it is on the grounds of the Mendota Mental Health Clinic campus. And there is a section of that where you can see two of the largest, well, the largest and the third largest Thunderbird mound right there. And you can
really.
walk right around them. Yeah. And right off of that area, it's kind of back in the woods and it's well overgrown, but it has been well documented. And it is that water panther, which it kind of looks like a monkey with a ringed tail, but they believe
Amazing.
that is the water panther. Well, the ironic part is that is right next to a place they call Governor's Island. Now, Governor's Island, it's not where the governor lived or anything like that. It's just it's actually a peninsula. So there's a little land bridge out to this small area, and there's just a tiny little loop there. But right off of Governor's Island, there has long held legends of these underwater panthers attacking canoes and
No.
dragging these Indian people to their depths right there. And they have it right there in the earthworks, that ring-tailed water panther. So it all kinds of ties it together. And that's, I talked to a guy that did Mounds of Wisconsin, and he also did, I believe it's Spirits of the Earth, effigy mounds of Madison. His name says Bob Birmingham. and he is a domain expert on the earthworks and specifically Aslan. And I got to talk to him, and I said, well, what do you think is the most important mound site that's remaining? And he said, it's got to be Mendota, because you have all of the mound builders' cosmology built into one. You have those thunderbirds of the air, you have the animals depicted of the ground, and then you have that underwater panther of the underwater. So you have all three levels of their cosmology depicted in one mound grouping, including that the largest Thunderbird effigy. So if you ever get back up to Madison and you have a day,
I'm going.
I will take you out there. It's only 3 minutes from my house, and I actually stumbled upon it when I first moved to the area. I just had gotten into this. I knew there was a lot of mounds in Madison. So kind of to tie this back to Geen. Geen actually lived out his final days at Mendota Mental Health Facility. So out of morbid curiosity, I wanted to see the grounds of there.
Right.
So as soon as I drove in, I saw the banners for MMI, Mendota Mental Health Institute. And on those banners, they have the depiction of the effigy mounds of those Thunderbirds.
What?
And I thought, they have to have effigy mounds here. So sure enough, I looked it up, and sure enough, there is the most important effigy site, according to Bob Birmingham, right there on the site. And you can walk right down to it, and you can practically touch the mounds. And I believe they call that the Eagle Mound, but it's pretty much conclusive that that is a depiction of that Thunderbird, of their lore.
I'm very blown away. This is all new to me. Wow, Jeff. Okay, so far A+, buddy. You're killing it right now. That to me is so wild, and I'm not trying to create conspiracy theories, but it's so odd to me that it's on the site of a mental health institution where they have on their banner the mound. I mean, it's just my esoteric mind goes places.
Absolutely. And what I've been told, I haven't verified this myself, but apparently a lot of places of high strangeness or window areas are adjacent to mental health institutes or prisons, which is, it seems like an odd place to do that. And the interesting thing about this is on the other side of the lake from the Madison Capitol. And you can see the Capitol from there, which is just beautiful. And it has to be probably a very expensive piece of property. And to have that preserved as part of that Mendota Mental Health Institute is kind of a blessing in disguise, because some developer would have knocked that off 100 years ago, and we would have known nothing about it, but it's well preserved there.
That is amazing. It's interesting what you said about the whatever you want to call it, coincidence, or who knows, maybe something more, that of mental health facilities and jails by High Strangeness. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Nathan Isaac or his work with his kind of like true crime, or his docu-series podcast Pennyroyal, right?
Pennyroyal, love Pennyroyal. Yes.
Okay, yeah, right. I mean, they spend like a 90-minute episode going over the mental health. I mean, like the mental health kind of crisis in that area, and the giant facility, which was like featured on 60 Minutes back in the 80s. But all kinds of crazy weird stuff is tied to that.
Mr. Isaac, he definitely has the strangeness on lock in that section of Kentucky. Where he lives, and he definitely, listening to Pennyroyal, had me dig deeper and kind of do a synchromistic journey into a lot of Wisconsin, and just the synchronicity of going there to say, okay, well, this is where Ed spent his final days, and finding those mounds, or rediscovering them for myself anyway. I mean, they've always been there. But
what a weird way to discover them.
Jeff. Exactly. So it's like, okay, well, this is a doubly intriguing and important place for me now.
Kind of like not shying too far away from this synchromistic occulty kind of theme. In terms of, is it Michael Bertio? Is it Bertio?
I've never heard it pronounced. I've always in my mind pronounce it Michael Berteau.
Berto. I haven't never heard it either. I've heard it pronounced a few different ways. Anyway, like a guy, like Timothy Allen Greenfield, who is kind of a quasi-famous magician occultist. He thinks Michael is the most powerful magician living to this day.
Is that true?
Well, that's what according to
Mr. Greenfield.
According to Greenfield. And he knows where the bodies are buried. But but I mean, is there any other kind of like occulted history in the southern Wisconsin region around Devil's Lake? I mean, I've been to Baraboo, and it feels very David Lynchian around there. I went to Circus World. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. But that's right by Devil's Lake, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was even legends that the Ringlings used their elephants to pave the roads or to clear the roads. Well, that is something that's probably more legend than it is fact. Horses that pulled a lot of their wagons definitely were involved in that.
Yeah.
And Ringling Brothers had a camp right there on Devil's Lake. And yeah, that Baraboo is the next town over.
Yeah.
Just north. So yeah, you have Devil's Lake, you have Baraboo, which is a circus town, and then you have maybe the weirdest town in Wisconsin, in the Wisconsin Dells.
What's going on in the Dells?
Well, the Dells is just it's more about the people that the Dells attracts, all kinds of matter of interesting folks just walking up and down the streets there. It's a great place for people watching.
Yeah,
for sure, because you'll see all sectors of society walking up and down.
What's the attraction? Is it just like a lake community? Like, why are people going there?
Devil's Lake is...
Or not Devil's Lake, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
the Dells.
Wisconsin Dells.
Yeah.
It is just a town built on tourism and tacky tourism at that.
I love tacky tourism.
Yeah, so...
saltwater taffy? Yes, please.
Absolutely. Saltwater taffy, fudge, brownies, whatever you want. Right there. It's just kind of a wild and wacky place. And then there's not nicer places there. Ishnala, one of my favorite supper club, it's right there on Mirror Lake, and they have Sundara Resort, which is a little swankier. They have nice golf, and then they have stuff for the lower rung of society as well. So you get a real mix of different people kind of interacting all there.
I love that.
But yeah, you'll have to go there on a sunny day in the summer and just kind of see it. Definitely recommend taking the original Wisconsin Dells Ducks, which is an amphibious decommissioned Army vehicle. And they take tours through Lake Delton and actually drop you onto the lake. And then they motorboat you around the lake and then back onto a trail.
Okay.
And you do a loop around there, and it's just something to experience when you're in the Wisconsin Dells. Is the original Ducks.
Oh, good God, yes. Okay. I mean, like, you sold me. What are you, the county commissioner?
I'm the tourist bureau chief. Yes.
Oh my God. But I mean, that's the thing. Look, folks, they're going to start thinking I work for the Wisconsin Tourism Department here. But I'm telling you, this is a great place to vacation with buddies, family, significant other, your solo trip.
Yeah.
So much weirdness to check out. Keeping into the weirdness, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I have, so the Kettle Moraine, beautiful area, right?
Yes.
It's kind of just gorgeous. And I have heard, that there's some Bigfoot stories around there, but I've also heard that there has been some goat man sightings.
So there is, Kettle Moraine for goat man. I'm trying to think of the actual boundaries of the Kettle Moraine, but there is Holy Hill, which is an enigmatic place and it is kind of a place for a pilgrimage of your everyday Catholic to go to Holy Hill and see the Twin Tower Cathedral there on top of the mount. Something I have not been able to partake in, but it is definitely on my bucket list, and I definitely want to go in fall when it's in full bloom. So if you're listening along at home, look up Holy Hill fall in Google and see the beautiful scenery there. But just beneath that hill is a little town of Hubertus, and there is a story of a goat man that lurks the grounds of Hubertus and along that road, Hogsback Road.
Oh boy.
And yes, and unlike we talk about the Beast of Bray Road, you don't hear any stories of it being malicious. You hear about maybe being confrontational, but not necessarily something that would harm humans. But the Goat Man, he's got a little darker edge to him. And there is stories of people walking along that road and have going missing. Now that seems it can be relegated to folklore, but something to be wary of if you find yourself on the base of the Holy Hill in Hubertus there.
Yeah, if you see a pan-looking creature,
Yeah.
I mean, engage if you want, but I mean, I'm going to go the other way probably.
Yeah, and you're talking about the Kettle Moraine, kind of a creepy place because you got Milwaukee, biggest city in Wisconsin there, but just outside of there, you get into this Kettle Moraine area, which is a natural preserve. And Jay Bachochin, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to connect with him, but he's done 2 documentaries on his Bigfoot journeys through there.
Really?
Finding Jay and Finding J2 are available on Amazon Prime, and he kind of walks through kind of the lore behind the place and kind of his journey with looking for Bigfoot in there. And I think he's got another one he's working on at the moment as well. So yeah, we got Dog Man, we got Bigfoot, we got a Goat Man, all hanging out in that edge of the state.
It's the place to be. Well, I mean, in kind of just a general question, I guess like, for example, like in Nebraska, since I've been, kind of like the last 4 years, really concentrating on Nebraska, I have found that, the most concentration of high strangeness is on the eastern side, running down along the Missouri River on eastern Nebraska. Now, there's great stories going throughout the state, but it seems like the highest concentration. Would you say that, as far as like in terms of like UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, and all this stuff, that southern Wisconsin has the highest concentration?
So that southeastern quadrant there. So you had 2 different lobes of glaciers kind of roll through there, and you kind of have unnatural, like different varied geology. And I know we talked about Nathan Paul Isaac and his the Kentucky anomaly.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious, so I kind of hopped on and found a GSS map of anomalies, and right there in that southeastern quadrant, there is a large magnetic anomaly or some kind of
really
weird anomaly that they were able to map, and it goes right by the town of Burlington, which is right between Lake Geneva and Elkhorn. So you have
oh my god,
Elkhorn with the Beast Bray Road. You have a lot of strangeness in Lake Geneva. My friend Rita, she just published a book about Lake Geneva's ghost. She does the ghost walks.
Really? So I know Lake Geneva had stuff going on.
Yeah, tons of stuff. And yeah, I'd recommend her book. I believe it's Lake Geneva Ghost. It's by Rita Mae Moore. You can find it on Amazon. Definitely recommend that for her collective lore. But one interesting thing about Lake Geneva is that is the home of Dungeons and Dragons. That's where Gary Gygax, I believe, is pronounced.
That's how I would say it.
Where he developed the name. I know some Dungeons and Dragon nerds are going to blow me up with the correct spelling or correct pronunciation, but Gygax. He really kind of, it was a composite creation of several of those role-playing games that spawned D&D. Right there, like Geneva, in his little basement, and somebody actually preserved that house. And I believe you can even Airbnb the original Dungeons and Dragons house there in Lake Geneva. But yeah, Burlington is a weird place too, and that's right between Elkhorn and Lake Geneva, or right along the side. So yeah, like you said, strange places. You got Whitewater, you got Lake Geneva, you got Delavan, which you'll be visiting not too long.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You got Elkhorn, and you have Burlington. There is a place in Burlington called the Burlington Woods, and now that is said to be home to a vortex.
It's the Burlington Woods. Yes, I'm
Yeah,
writing this down. Sorry.
Burlington Vortex.
I heard about this through Chad Lewis years ago, and then I forgot what the name was.
Yeah, so if you have Chad's latest Wisconsin's Guide to Haunted Places,
I think
He
I do, actually.
features the whole lore on the Burlington Woods. And I believe what he said in that book is that pretty much you go from the parking lot, you walk through a little opening of woods, and then you're right there in the woods. And people have been in that woods, and they've done photography, and they've held their phone steady, um, at shoulder height or up to their face, and they've held it still, and they've seen swirling and kind of this vortex phenomenon. A lot of people feel it. People have said they encountered wood nymphs or sprites, or
yes,
or different kind of fey folk apparitions or strange lights, all
my
kinds
God.
of crazy stuff in the Burlington Woods. But then you asked about cult activity or other stuff like that. Well, I don't want to call it a cult,
Yeah.
but when Joseph Smith was murdered in Carthage, Illinois, you had Sidney Rigdon and you had Brigham Young. They were kind of the successors of the church. Well, there was one other gentleman that thought he had the true succession rights to the Mormon church, and his name was James Strang. Well, James Strang said he had a letter of succession. I can't remember the exact word, but he had a letter from Joseph Smith saying that he was to be the successor to him for the Mormon church. Well, of course, Rigdon and Brigham Young, they kind of poo-pooed that and said, no, that's a forgery. We're going west. And Strang went north, and he ended up in Burlington, Wisconsin, of all places, and kind of settled there and had a sect of Mormonism called the Strangite sect. So I'm doing some research on this one, so I don't have it all ferreted out.
This is so fascinating, though.
But he ended up finding, quote unquote, finding similar plates to what Joseph Smith found in Burlington on a place called the Hill of Promise, and said that this was his divine sign that he was the rightful heir or rightful successor to the Mormon Church of the Latter-day Saints. So he had the claim to that. And apparently they couldn't afford to settle in Burlington. So they went to a small island in it'd be northern Michigan, kind of by the Upper Peninsula, kind of by Mackinac Island, called Beaver Island. Right. And they kind of set up a settlement there. And James Strang actually declared himself king. And his name, I believe he declared himself the King of America, of all places.
Okay.
So yeah, James Strang.
You can just do that.
the Mormon King, they call him. So there's a lot out there. I've only scratched the surface. I'm going to do a deep dive on that one. And
what a book that would be, my friend.
Yeah, I'm sure there are scholarly works on it, but just to compile something would be great, just for preservation. And that being right there in Burlington, right in the southeastern quadrant, definitely.
Is there like a heavy Freemason? See, here I go. I'm getting into.
No, that's cool. I love this stuff.
Yeah, but I know the Masons had their problems with the Mormons, and Joseph Smith especially, where I guess I'm just curious. Is there was there or is there a Freemason scene there?
There is a beautiful Freemasonic temple in Madison. I've been there. A couple of friends of mine actually got a chance to ghost hunt it there. I don't know if they've had a couple of experiences. I don't know if they were able to collect any concrete evidence. But then there's the whole lore around the Madison Capitol and the symbolism, and everything that's involved in there seems a bit Freemasonic as far as an avowed Freemasonic presence. I would say no, but it seems like there was some, there had to have been something there that kind of informed all of this artwork. Have you had a chance to visit the Capitol in Wisconsin?
From the outside, I have not gone in. Okay.
No. There is a guided tour. It's only 1 hour. I would highly recommend it because they give you kind of a tour of all the major chambers. So the governor's office, both houses of the legislature, and also the judicial, and all of the artwork in there is just amazing and completely esoteric.
Oh.
Yeah, so I would highly recommend that. And I did a podcast with my friend Mark from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, which would be a great show for you to get on.
Yeah.
and kind of went over some of the more esoteric leaning stuff of Madison, my adoptive hometown.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend that. Checking that out, checking out the Capitol in Madison if you're ever there. It's well worth your time, and a free tour, and it's only an hour.
Perfect. I'm in. Oh my God. Jeff, I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to give you 45 seconds to 1 minute alone with the audience. And if you want to, anything that's on your mind, this is your time. If you want to talk about a recipe you're fond of, go right ahead, or what you're listening to, or what's exciting to you artistically these days. The minute is yours. I shall return.
Sounds great. So, Steve, he asked me about chili. Let's go over a chili recipe. You have a can of northern beans, you have a can of kidney beans, and you have a can of black beans. You have a can, I prefer the tomatoes with the chilies. And then I kind of cheat here, and I go with the store-bought McCormick seasoning. So I like a little heartier stew, so I use about 2 pounds of ground beef, usually probably like a 90-10, so you don't have as much fat to drain off. I fry that up. I throw that into a colander in the sink, and while that is draining, I'll come along with those tomatoes, and I'll heat those up. I'll throw that chili seasoning in. Got to have the chilies. Maybe I'm going to throw those chipotles with adobo sauce in there. I'm going to stir that all up, brown it out. I'm going to throw my ground beef back in the pan, and I'm going to bring that to a simmer. And only then will I put those beans in. And those beans, I want those to be well rinsed. And then I will bring that all to a simmer, because I don't want to overcook the beans. I want a nice kind of a light cook on those beans, so they're not too mushy. So that would be my perfect chili recipe, and it is right in time for Steve to rejoin me.
Oh, I cannot wait.
Steve, I just gave my chili recipe. Now,
did you really?
I did, yeah.
For free?
For free.
What a guy.
I cheat, and I go with the McCormick seasoning pack because
That's fine.
Because it's simple.
It's also the same thing, same spices you'd be putting in anyways.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just they do it for you.
Yeah. So I went through the whole process, and I was able to do that while you're gone. So that'll be a nice trick.
We're always, there's no wasted time here, Jeff. We're accomplishing things.
Yeah. So there you go.
I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, kind of, now that I know your game for some of the weirder stuff.
Yeah.
I once heard, and I can't remember, it was on a podcast, but it was a podcast about the smiley face killer.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if folks know about the smiley face killer, but the smiley face killer, and please jump in if you feel like I'm getting something wrong, but it's this serial killer either network, but they usually kill a college student, leave him or her by some kind of body of water, and then you will see a smiley face painted.
Mm-hmm.
But this one person I was listening to, a so-called expert on the smiley face killer, was saying La Crosse, Wisconsin was where they've had the most reports.
I believe so, yes. La Crosse, Wisconsin is probably one of the most drunkest college scenes in the nation. I believe there are more liquor license per capita and per square mile than any other college town in America there. So it would be easy to blame drunken debauchery on a lot of these disappearances. And there are several college towns that are along rivers. I believe Stevens Point is one of them, and La Crosse is right there on a river. But One weird thing about this, and I haven't done extensive research on this. Um, I stick to mostly ghost UFOs, cryptids, and
Me
then
too.
I dabble into the true crime stuff.
Sure.
And
They seem there's a linkage with the locations of these things that I've discovered,
yeah.
which is weird. But
So one of the I can't find it anymore, but are you familiar with Tim Dillon?
mm-mm.
Tim Dillon is a comedian, and this was in, I believe, 2018. He had a guy that claimed to be a survivor of the smiley face murder.
Whoa.
And I believe he didn't say specifically where he was, but he said it was in Wisconsin. And from the process of elimination, I think it was in Stevens Point, where he got drunk one night. He went out, ran into some people that he didn't know, and then he woke up on the other side of a fence, and it was next to a river. And I
Whoa.
wish I could re-listen to that. I believe it's archived. You might have to go into his special feed, Tim Dillon's podcast. But listening to that story, it was like, okay, I gotta dig deeper into this, and I got to really start documenting a lot of this lore. So, kind of listening to that, I was like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
But the weird thing about the smiley face killer is a lot of times the victims will go missing, and then their bodies will show up like a month later, and they'll be like, well, they couldn't have been out here for a month. Their body would have been more decomposed. So
Right.
it makes you think, well, were they in captivity somewhere? Were they being kept somewhere?
Right.
And it's made people come to the conclusion that there is a network of these serial killers
Mhm.
operating on these small campuses and taking these young, and it's specifically men, and they're usually athletic,
Yeah.
good physical shape, and abducting them, and then they're finding their bodies. Now, there was something that happened. I'm trying to think exactly the timeline. It was 2009, and it was my hometown of Wisconsin Rapids. And there was like a big, so Wisconsin Rapids, by the name, it is a river town. It's right on the Wisconsin River. The Wisconsin River actually bisects the town east and west. So west side of Wisconsin is on the west side of our west side of Wisconsin Rapids on the west side of the Wisconsin River. And they'll have like Riverfest with Pioneer Days or fireworks. And there was a guy that went missing, and they thought, okay, well, he just got drunk and he got too close to the river, and the river swept him away. Well, his body wasn't found. Well, then a few days later, another young guy about his age, I think they were about 20 at the time, he went missing.
What?
Well, a couple days later, a lady received a loud pounding on her door and heard screaming, and she opened the door to this naked young man, and he had escaped an enclosure where he was being held against his will.
Good God.
And it turns out that the cops were called. He pointed them in the direction of this house, and there was another young man. That other young man that went missing was also alive in that house.
What?
And they both escaped. I don't know, the identities. I know it's a really sensitive topic, so I almost loathe to bring it up.
Right.
But it's something that did happen, and the perpetrator was brought to justice. But there is a kind of a personal link here for me. I had a friend. He got married, and his one of the fellow groomsmen in the wedding was at a bar one night, and he was shooting pool with this guy. And the guy says, yeah, I got a brand new table in my basement. Do you guys want to come over and check it out?
Oh, boy.
Well, one thing led to another, and they got busy, and they never went to the guy's house. But it turns out that was the guy that abducted those kids. So he could have been a victim of this guy by the name of Ed Landfear, I believe his name was. And
that is so messed up.
So I live it's a small town, Wisconsin Rapids, 18,000 people. If your dad didn't work at the mill in town, the paper mill, your neighbor, his dad,
right,
or your classmate, his dad worked at the mill. Well, my dad actually knew this guy from the mill, and he was a little bit weird, but unassuming, harmless, right? Not exactly. So, fortunately, that guy was brought to justice before anything worse could happen. But just a crazy story from, a place that I called my hometown.
That is so scary.
Yeah.
I know what to
Yeah.
say. That's a very scary.
Yeah. And to think, my friend's friend could have been kind of entrapped in that ring. Yeah.
I can't. That's hard to come back from. That's that's awful. Oh my god, that's so scary. I've never heard of that. That's awful. Yeah, but I'm almost positive that but David Lynch had a summer place outside of Madison, right?
He did
at one point.
So his
with Mary Sweeney, editor,
so his on again, off again, ex-wife. I think they were still partners to the end. R.I.P. David Lynch. But
I'm with you.
Yeah, so he actually had a summer home in Madison. Mary Sweeney is from Madison, grew up here. There is a rumor that he lived in a Frank Lloyd Wright in Madison, which could be possible, but I'm not sure. I couldn't quite pin down exactly where David Lynch lived while he was in Madison. So if anybody knows where David Lynch lived in Madison, shoot me a message because I would love to know.
I would too.
But yeah, so there is a lot of lore about David Lynch. He worked out of this place called Tandem Studios, where he did a lot of his visual artwork. So when he wasn't directing movies, he liked to do these bizarre kind of what would the word for it be? Almost, I don't want to say pornographic, but kind of.
It's graphic for sure. It's outsider art, like he's using like decomposing animals sometimes on his, letting like flies eat cheese and it gets weird.
Yeah, some very bizarre artwork prints that he put out through Tandem Press, and you can buy the compendium of there. So they actually had an exhibit here. It was a couple years ago of all of the artwork, or I guess select of the artwork that he created at Tandem Press, and you could buy an original Lynch in there. If you had $3,500 laying around, you could have bought an original piece of art, which probably appreciated in value since then. But
probably $35,000 now. Yeah.
So it was really cool to see. And then there's a lot of lore about, the different haunts that he would hang out around town, whether there's this really neat tiger bar, they call it the Tigre Lounge. Apparently David Lynch worked out there, he frequented the place back when you could smoke. I could just imagine.
Yeah.
David Lynch at the end of the bar smoking a cigarette.
Amazing.
Would be a sight to behold. Different cabbies who picked him up and took him home. And, and David Lynch, he's kind of had a renaissance in later years with Twin Peaks. I don't think, many people knew him by his face or his look until probably the last 2 decades of his life.
Yeah.
I think when he did a little more media, he got a little more attention for a lot of that Twin Peaks stuff, kind of when that whole thing came back around. So the interesting thing is, while he was living in Madison with Mary Sweeney, this gentleman by the name of Elvin Strait decided to ride his tractor from Iowa to visit his dying brother in Wisconsin. And he took his lawn tractor. I believe it was something like 600 miles. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, it was from western Iowa to Wisconsin.
To southern Wisconsin. Well, while that was happening, there was a lot of media reported about that, and David Lynch wanted that story, and Mary Sweeney and David Lynch they started writing the story, and somehow Disney and David Lynch converged to get the straight story, and make that. So you go from Twin Peaks, Eraserhead to the straight story, which is a complete departure, but it was critically acclaimed.
Well, I love it. I mean, I think I'm also the biggest David Lynch fanboy you'll ever meet. But I always find it funny that the film before he was Lost Highway, which is arguably one of his more just surreal out there. Well,
darker,
it was definitely his most brutal movie. And then he makes his straightest movie, the straight story.
The straight story, yeah. I
As
mean,
opposed to a lost highway, he's like, nope, I'm just going to do one simple road straight. Like it always makes me laugh. But you mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright, so this is a great time to bring up
mhm.
some questions I have about Frank Lloyd Wright's relationship to Wisconsin. Tell us about House on the Rock and Taliesin, but I also want to know if there, because I've heard this, and I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that at Taliesin, one of the workers there was unhappy and he went nuts and started murdering people and then lit the place on fire.
Yeah. So
Please.
we'll start with Frank Lloyd Wright. So just outside of Madison, a sleepy little village. It's called Spring Green. Now that's where Wright really set up shop. So, Wright did most of his early work out of his Chicago home, and he built up a little neighborhood, Oak Park, in Chicago. Well, while he was designing a house for one of his clients, his name was Edwin Cheney, he became smitten with Cheney's wife. Her name was Martha Mama Borthwick Cheney. Well, Wright and Borthwick, they began a tryst that would last several years. Now, both separated from their spouses. Now, Wright, this was highly scandalous because he had 6 kids at the time, and one of them was still an infant. And he goes off with this other married lady, and I believe she had 2 kids at the time. So Wright, of course, wanted to find his own little place. So he went back to his hometown, kind of his mom's hometown of Spring Green, to set up his own little hideaway. Of course, this was very scandalous. It caught the local Madison press. And after hearing about the abandonment and the plans to build this little studio called Taliesin, they named it the Love Cottage. So, undeterred by scandal, Wright built the first iteration of what we know as Taliesin today near Hillside, Wisconsin, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Spring Green, Wisconsin, all of it. This in like the Wisconsin River Valley near Spring Green.
Such an amazing area. It's so pretty around there.
So beautiful. Yes. There's a reason that Frank Lloyd Wright, where he could have went to LA, he could have stayed in Chicago, that he went back to this place because it is absolute beauty. And if you know anything about Frank Lloyd Wright, he's all about the landscape and fitting the house or the structure to the lay of the land. That's where he was really talented, was building. He didn't want to build a house on the land. He wanted to build within the land. That was kind of his ethos. Mm-hmm. So 1911, he set out to build this hideaway. Well, it was August 15th, 1914. So it was only about 3 years after he built this house. He's got his new gouma, for lack of a better term, so he was still married at the time because his wife wouldn't grant him the divorce.
Right.
So he had her shacked up in his love cottage. He was working at the Midway Gardens in Chicago at the time when on August 15th of 1914, tragedy struck that house. A male servant by the name of Julian Carleton, he set fire to the living quarters and he wielded a hatchet to the workers and the residents. Well, at the end of this hatchet wielding, 7 were dead, including Wright's beloved Mama, along with her 2 children.
Really?
Yes. So it is true. He set fire to it. He murdered 7 people. Now, this Julian Carleton, some people believe he was an immigrant from Barbados. Some say he was an African American from I believe somewhere along the Mississippi Delta area. It's not quite clear his origins, but we know where he ended up. Well, after the hatchet attack, he drank muriatic acid in an attempt to kill himself. but it didn't work. And he ended up not being able to talk. So we never really understood his motivation for the attack. Some people thought that he was just disgruntled. Some people think he was possessed. So unfortunately, he couldn't take anything by mouth, and he ended up perishing due to lack of nutrition after drinking that muriatic acid. Yeah, so rather brutal way to die. 7 people, including, Mama, her 2 kids.
My God.
Died of that hatchet attack and the subsequent fire. So
is that the same location where Taliesin is now?
That is the same.
Is it really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it was just rebuilt. So like I said, the deceased, they were actually transported to the neighboring cottage, the cottage of Wright's sister. It's called Tanyadiri, which is I believe it's a Welsh word for under the oaks. So it was another one of Wright's cottages there. Mm-hmm. Now, although the fire consumed much of the living area, Wright rebuilt Taliesin, but and then 1923, another fire would consume that cottage. So that was the second fire. So that was Taliesin 2. It burned. And that was due to what they believed to be faulty wiring. So no hatch wielding lunatics.
Right.
Yeah. Nothing like that for that one. Fortunately, Wright built Taliesin 3. That is the one that you can visit today. Now, some say that Mama, she never left Tanyadiri. Linda Gottfried, in her book Haunted Wisconsin, she reports that a woman in a flowing white dress appears near dusk, and some visitors will catch a whiff of acrid smoke, a reminder of the unthinkable acts that were perpetrated at Taliesin. Now, you can visit that hideaway in the hills, and you can actually see Tanyadiri as part of one of those tours. And I know you mentioned that you tried to book a Taliesin tour, but unfortunately they're full. Yes, if you are going to want to visit Taliesin, please plan ahead, reserve your tickets,
like a month ahead.
because especially on weekend days, they go quickly.
Yeah, I went on a Saturday in like the middle of summer, and I was like, I'll just be able to waltz on in there nice and easy. And it was like not even. They were nice though. They let me walk around the first floor,
the grounds.
Yeah, and it was like unthinkably beautiful. Like just
it's breathtaking.
So cool. I did not know. I mean, that's the most thorough story. So it is like verifiable and true. Because I remember like telling somebody, they're like,
true.
Okay, this is good to know, because I was telling this to a friend of mine. It's like, there's that rumor about all the Frank Lloyd Wright places. I'm like, okay, but
I mean, there's a lot of lore built up around Frank Lloyd Wright properties, absolutely, and one resource for that is me and my co-host Mike Huberty of American Ghost Walks did Wisconsin Legends podcast. We did a 2-parter on Frank Lloyd Wright, and we go from pretty much his upbringing and go pretty much through his death. He lived 90 years, and 70 years of that was consumed with architecture. So the amount of structures that he either designed and built is astounding. The mark, and then just how many architects that he inspired and how many works he inspired through his works. Just the ripple effect is incredible. And just living in the central part of the state, there are several roads here with Frank Lloyd Wright highway signs where you can actually go and tour the properties. I got to check out one of those properties, a warehouse of all places in Richland Center. So a lot of people, they connect Spring Green with Frank Lloyd Wright, but Richland Center was actually where he was born, as kind of the next town over. And I got to go to the AG German warehouse, a grocery warehouse that he built because he was indebted to one of the grocers. And it's an interesting place. It's got kind of that Mayan frieze architecture around the top. So it is completely impractical, but it is completely right, which is amazing. And they've there's a preservation society that I got to visit with there. They showed me around there, and they're opening it now.
Oh, great.
They're opening it now for tours, and they had like a haunted house there, and it's great to see, and great to see it preserved.
Oh man. Well, one more question before we leave. Right, and I know Richard Spence, who's coming on my show. I really admire his work, and he's a academic of like occult stuff. Not
Yeah,
occult,
the esoteric, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's amazing. But like he found a connection. I believe him and Adam Gorightly found a connection between James Shelby Downard and Frank Lloyd Wright.
I
Have you
don't
heard
know.
about that?
No, I haven't. So I'm intrigued to hear more about that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know the
I'll
connective tissue there, but I know.
Yeah, there is a connection, and it's between either his first wife or Mama. I don't think it's Mama. It might have been one of his later
So
wives.
Ogilvana was his last life or his last wife towards the end of his life, and she was really his muse in his later years. Some of um, his best architecture work was done while he was with Ogilvana, including I think Johnson Wax Building, which is a beautiful piece, the Annunciation Greek Orthodox in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, the Guggenheim. Obviously, the Monona Terrace, which is in Madison, was built posthumously based on his designs and by the help of Wesley Peters, his successor. So she was really his muse in the later. But the interesting thing about Ogilvana is that she was a Georgy Gurdjieff devotee.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, folks, if you don't know who Gurdjieff was, but he was a Swedish. Was he Swedish?
No, he was
was it Austrian?
Armenian.
Armenian. Okay. But he was like an occultist, esotericist, like kind of like guru person.
Yes, he was a guru. I believe. Where did he set up? He's got an interesting backstory, and
Yeah,
I think he's of Armenian descent. And
Whitley Strieber is a big Gurdjieff guy.
yeah, so I think Gurdjieff's one of those guys is kind of like at least his lore is like parts unknown.
Yeah,
which is
right.
kind of cool. But
Yeah.
Gurdjieff actually visited Taliesin. So
Oh wow.
in Wright's later life, before he got some of, I think before he did the Guggenheim and some of his more notable projects, he kind of had a dip in his career. And Ogilvana opened up Taliesin to a thing they called the Fellowship, where they brought in young architects. And it sounded more like a cult than an actual architectural school.
Really?
And it was actually being investigated by the FBI.
No
because
way.
they wanted to use, I believe, the GI funding. And they're like, well, this isn't a serious academic institution. It's more like a cult. And they had mostly young men there. And there was only a few females. Ogilvana said, okay, well, the female, she's going to pair up with this guy. And if you guys are sexually frustrated, you can work that out amongst yourselves. So there's actually something in the FBI report about practicing homosexuality on Taliesin, which would have been a big no-no in that day and age.
Era. Yeah.
So Gurdjieff actually, he visited that. There is a flowery letter that was allegedly penned by Frank Lloyd Wright about Gurdjieff and saying how happy they were to welcome him there, and he's this great guy. But clearly, it was written by Ogilvana.
That's amazing! Wow, I did not know that. That is so fascinating.
So I would highly recommend. Yeah, give. I wrote both of those episodes. I think we recorded for about 3 hours, and I cut it down to about 2 hours on that.
I need to listen to those immediately.
2 1-hour blocks, and just kind of. So there's this modern conception of Frank Lloyd Wright as a kind of a naturalist, materialist, like everything can be explained by nature. But kind of my objective was to go deeper into esoterica with Frank Lloyd Wright and be like, was he really this materialist? Well, he was brought up by the Lloyd Joneses. They were a kind of a deconstructed Catholic or a deconstructed Christian. I'm drawing a blank on the exact sect of Christianity they followed, but his dad, he read a lot of the Vedic texts. He was a Baptist preacher and read a lot of mystical stuff. He read like Emerson, Thoreau, He had Walden. So all this stuff that Frank Lloyd Wright was exposed to at a very young age definitely led an impression on him. And then doing the Guggenheim in the manner that he did it by a strange lady by the Baroness Hilaribe is what she went by. She was the curator of the Guggenheim collection, and she is the one who tapped Frank Lloyd Wright to do that. And she was a devotee of Madame Blavatsky and that. So that informed a lot of the structure of the Guggenheim, the 7 layers, the spiral, the ascension. A lot of that motif was kind of built into that. And a lot of things go ahead.
No, I was just going to, theosophy is everywhere in the 20th century.
Yes. Yep. So she was a theosophist, and that definitely informed a lot of the structure and design of the Guggenheim. And then a lot of people don't know that after Charles Fort died, Frank Lloyd Wright was a member of the 14th Society. So for a naturalist materialist, being in the 14th Society doesn't seem like that would be a place for him. So there's a lot there, and definitely he had kind of an esoteric hidden milieu. You know, they I think it was Ayn Rand. She actually came and visited that fellowship there, and she got to visit with Wright, and it said that Howard Rourke from the Fountainhead was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. And I think kind of the tying between that Randian archetype of this architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, Howard Rourke, that made people think that, okay, well, Frank Lloyd Wright, you know, he's all about building. He's all about nature. He's going to be of a kind of atheist materials persuasion, but digging into it, it couldn't be any further from the truth.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. So
that is so interesting because I've discovered as I've gotten older that he wasn't the best person, probably. But his work as architecture is absolutely astounding to experience.
He was a complicated character.
Yeah.
Just like any other historical figure,
sure, absolutely.
And he obviously stepped out on his wife and his 6 kids and had an affair with an actress before he settled down with Ogilvana, and just didn't have much time for his kids. He was definitely an absent father, and which is ironic because he loathed his father for that exact same thing. Is that his father wasn't as present in his life as that he would like him to have been. Yeah,
fascinating figure. Jeff, do you have time for one more? I've kept you for like an hour and a half. I'm so sorry.
So that specific, no, I got as much time as you need. And that sect of Christianity that I was thinking is called Unitarian.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
and there's a Unitarian meeting house right across from the hospital that my wife works at in Madison. So a beautiful structure that Frank Lloyd Wright designed. And he did temples, synagogues. He did that Greek Annunciation. So being a rational atheist materialist is the furthest thing from the truth there. So if you want to hear that more, Wisconsin Legends podcast, 2 episodes on that. I think
I would love to link that in the show notes if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
I'm very excited to listen to that. Jeff, I wanted to ask you because I'm a UFO nut, and while most people, actually, I shouldn't say it historically, but in the last 5 years, Joe Symington obviously has gotten a lot of play. We all love the space pancakes. However, I think we've probably all heard that story maybe enough at this point. Not enough. You can never talk about it enough. But on my show, I've talked about it quite a bit. But there is a UFO story that I have always felt that is very overlooked in Wisconsin, and that is police officer George Wheeler's experience in 1976. Can you tell us about that?
So maybe you know this one better than me, but this is Elmwood, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the notes for this one. So
no, that's okay. No, I mean, but we kind of piece through it together.
I'll get the main beats. So Elmwood, Wisconsin, George Wheeler, police officer. out on patrol, saw a large craft, apparently the size of a football field.
Yeah.
And he
It
went
was like a big structured disc craft,
yes,
wasn't it?
I believe so. And he went to approach the craft. And the last thing he remembers is the power going out in the squad car and then waking up in a daze. And he was actually hospitalized. And when they got the patrol car back to the station, they saw that the ignition points and all the electronics were fried out of it. So apparently it was something that affected the car in a profound way. And it led George Wheeler to say that whatever I encountered, their intention was to kill us.
Yeah.
So, that's what I know about that one. But
and the thing is, he died like 2 months after that.
He did not. He did not live long after that.
Yeah,
you're correct about that. And yes, I did do a 2-episode podcast on Wisconsin Legends podcast, Wisconsin UFOs, and we cover the Wheeler incident. My co-host Mike, he covered that one, so he was a little more familiar with that one than me. But we go through everything from these airship sightings that started in Omaha, right there. And then made their way across the Midwest, came through Chicago, up through Milwaukee, over to Madison, and then through the North Woods of Wisconsin. So kind of some linkage there between Wisconsin, specifically Milwaukee, Madison, and Omaha right there, which is really cute, cool. Yeah.
The Omaha sighting's crazy because like 600 people saw it.
Yeah.
It was a mass sighting. Yeah. I mean, that was like in the newspapers. It's like a very well documented case.
I want to say that was 1896, something like that.
I believe 96 or 97.
Somewhere in there.
I should know that. I think it is 96.
Because it started in Omaha and then that was the following summer. And I believe actually some of them actually started out in San Francisco, of all places.
I think the first ones, honestly, it started in the Bay Area, and then all of a sudden it was like all over the Midwest for like 2 years.
It was wild, and I'm not sure why nobody's written about this. I mean, like an extensive. I've seen like the different reports, but like I want somebody, and maybe that's me or you.
Yeah. I think. Well, did Jerome Clark might have written a book about? Jerome Clark has written about it a lot.
It's
but I'm not
been
sure
in compendiums of
that might be
UFO broader lore, but I think it deserves its own treatment.
It definitely does, especially that wave of 96, 97, because it was. I mean, the reports are in the hundreds, like it's really crazy.
Yeah, and there's like that was recent enough that you can go on newspapers.com and actually pull the articles, and
it's easy.
Actually, they're legible, because I know before like the 1890s, a lot of those the scan quality is just not that great, but
it's tough. Yeah.
But in that era, in the late 1800s, everything's legible, everything's documented, and it seems like there was something to it.
There were, I mean, like either it's the most an incredibly well orchestrated newspaper hoax, and I don't doubt that a lot of them were, or some at least, were newspaper hoaxes, because that was definitely a thing that went on in that era when news was slow.
Yeah, the yellow journalism.
Yeah, but I don't think that explains everything at all. Like, I mean, especially like the mass, because there was a lot of the especially in the Midwest and Kansas and Iowa, I know it was like groups of people, whole towns witnessing these things, sometimes seeing people waving to them, like, I mean, Zelia Edgar, who is another great Wisconsin researcher, did a 3-part series on our YouTube channel on the airship wave. And a lot of what she did is talk about the contactee aspect of it. And it's probably the best thing I've ever seen on the airship, to be honest.
Zelia's great. Yeah, she is great. She's from around the area, and she's documented a lot of strange Wisconsin stuff. And
she's great.
One of my friends, Mike Bass, Wisco Mythos, does a lot of these great posters. That's actually his niece. So there's a lot of kind of spooky stuff in their upbringing between Zelia's mom and Mike Bass, and the house that they grew up in, and kind of informed her worldview on this stuff. So it's always fun to kind of dive into, see what Zelia is working on.
Yeah, she's great. She's made some great contributions, I think. Well, what are some of your what's your favorite UFO encounter story from Wisconsin?
So there is this one, obviously the space pancakes.
You're not going to beat. That's one of the greatest of all time, so.
So if there was a second one, it would have to be the Bosack humanoid. Have you heard of this one?
I don't think so, but my God, anytime a humanoid is involved, you have my attention, sir.
Okay, so this one happened. It was December 2nd of 1974, and you're gonna like the way this one resolves. Oh. So Polk County dairy farmer William Bosack was driving home from a farm co-op meeting, as you do, right? At 10:30 p.m. on a particularly foggy night, early December 1974, right? About a mile from his home, he spotted a cylindrical shaped object hovering in the distance. Bosack slowed down to see if he could identify the object. Above him was a 10-foot long, 3-foot wide structure with a brightly illuminated interior.
Oh, yes.
Recalling what he experienced, Bosack stated, "I could see a figure with its arms raised above its head. It was a different kind of creature than you'd see on this earth. It looked a good deal like a man, but it had a different face than you'd see. It had a cow-looking face."
He said, cow-looking face?
Yeah. Well, he's a
farmer. He's going to describe
he's a dairy farmer. Yeah. That's his milieu, right?
That's his lens, man.
That's his lens. And a lot of this stuff, this trickster stuff, it kind of the screen effect. Yeah. It comes across as something you can relate to. So he said the face was hairless with a beardless chin. It was dressed in a tight-fitting garment with the appearance of brown fur. It was just as scared as I was. Now, the encounter was investigated by the Wisconsin-based APRO, the Aerial Phenomenal Research Organization, which later kind of evolved into what we know today as MUFON. So after conducting extensive interviews with Bosack and his family, they determined that he was honest and forthright with his encounter. So it seemed like he was a credible witness. As for that identity of the occupant, speculation abounds. Was it a weird race of alien, an intergalactic cow Bigfoot? Was it a cow sent to Bosack's farm as a time traveler? Now, in a strange twist of fate, William Bosack left this world exactly 22 years later to the day. December 2nd, 1996 is when Bosack kind of shuffled off the mortal coil. So those 22 years to the day after seeing that cow humanoid.
Yeah.
So
maybe it came back and took him,
We never will know. But I find that one, endlessly fascinating. We could talk about space pancakes for days, but we got to talk about the cow humanoid as well.
I have not heard this. See, I mean, I'll tell you, Jeff, the weirder, the better when it comes to UFO knots for me, That is exactly what I'm talking about with a cow head. But that is just indicative of the 60s and 70s where the sheer variety of what people are experiencing in conjunction with UFOs was so much cooler. It's so wild. It was so diverse.
Absolutely. They must have had better drugs back then.
I think they did. Yes. I mean, the weed's so strong nowadays, you feel like we'd have better aliens, But UFOs have never been more boring in a lot of ways. I do want to ask you this.
I blame that on Whitley Strieber.
Yeah, Strieber did it, dang it. He homogenized, then we get the Greys for 20 years, Boring. But I do want to ask you, since I have you on for just one more second.
Yeah.
So in terms, here's another way to talk about the Joe Symington case, I think. Mm-hmm. So I know Eagle River is a small community, but is there other weird things that have been like okay, so we have the Symington encounter in, was that 67?
61.
61. Wow. Okay. 61. But has there been other weird things reported in the area? And also, do you know much about Symington's life afterwards? Like he never experienced anything again, did he? Like, or is there rumors or? He had any
So
dirt on the
no,
area?
there was a guy that kind of perpetuated the case of the Simonton affair, and his name was Judge Carter, and he was like a local judge, and he was also like a member of like a UFO club.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of anything specifically that in that area that happened. I'm sure there probably was, just because it's Wisconsin and we have lots of weird sightings
Very much.
all over the state. But specifically in regards to or relation to the Simonton thing afterwards, I don't know. And then as far as Joe Simonton, what he said after he got all of the media attention after the Space Pancake debacle, he said, if it happened again, I wouldn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
Just because he wasn't a guy that was looking for fame. He
Yeah.
didn't make any money off of this. It was more trouble than it was worth to him.
Yeah.
So I know and I have a copy of it and I can send it to you on a PDF, but it was like a trifold brochure that he sold for like $1.
Right.
Just so he could kind of give his official account of what happened.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
man.
I'll shoot that over to you. But
oh my God.
Yeah, it seemed like it was, if it was a stunt, there was nothing to be gained by it other than a headache.
Amazing. Yeah, cause it's like very little is known about his life afterwards because he just obviously wanted to stay out of the limelight. But
man, he just lived in rural Wisconsin. I think he was married at the time. It seems like a lot of the early reports it kind of alluded to him just being like a loner and a bachelor.
Right.
But I think he was married, and just like the whole airship thing, the Joe Simonton thing deserves its own treatment. Like
it does. Yeah.
I know. Greg and Dana Newkirk, you familiar?
Yeah.
They did their Haunted Museum podcast. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they actually did an episode on the Simonton affair last year. That's
amazing.
They really dug into it deep, and they were able to find some things that I wasn't able to at first blush. So I definitely recommend giving that, because I think they've done the best. I think Connor, kind of their co-host on that show, the producer, he did a really great job on that.
Amazing. I know Barry. There's an old Fortean ufologist named Barry Greenwood, and he has a piece of it.
Really?
Yeah, and he's had it for a long ass time too. And I don't know if he got it from Hynek or whoever, but like he actually is I think donated to David Marler's UFO museum like warehouse.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, me too. Well, he was on Erica Luke's show, and he actually pulled it out and showed people. Yeah, I saw him hold it up.
Okay, if you could find that, send it to me.
I will. I mean, it's for real. I mean, it just looks like a tiny little piece of cardboard, kind of what.
Yeah, he said it was. Yeah, it was like. Yeah, he said it tasted like cardboard.
Yeah, so amazing.
Well, can you imagine being handed that and be like, I want to try that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling I'd eat it. And I've read a lot about the Fae, so I should know better. But
so a lot of people ask me about that. They're like, well, if you get pixie led into a Fae realm, you're not supposed to eat anything. That's been, well established. But since they came to him, I think that was kind of a loophole.
I think it was the loophole. And also, what is the deal with, so a lot of airship, the contactee aspect of the airship where people were meeting the visitors off the airship, they were always asking people to run errands. They're like, here's a quarter. Go get me like 3 gallons of water in a newspaper in a matchbook. Like, but water is this common thing where Joe Simonton was told to go get water. Like, there are all these like little motifs that I find very interesting. It seems like a weird thing to make up. Like, there was some water. I think I could conjure something better than that.
Kind of the Jacques Vallée scholarship on it, or like kind of informs us of like the weirder. What he calls the Magonian aspect of it.
Yes. Where everything's just slightly off.
Yes. Yeah. And like we talked about the screen, kind of the presentation of something you'd be familiar with, like in the Bosack. Like, it looked like a cow, like not a Bigfoot, but a cow. Yeah.
Well, there does seem, especially with UFOs, that there is this display theatrical aspect to it, where It's going to take some genres that you're familiar with and manifest itself like that. And for what reason? Who knows?
Yeah.
But like,
and almost with like a David Lynchian twist to it to bring that full circle.
Right, where dream logic is the law of the land, and things are just not. Well, I think Jenny Randall's put it perfectly: the Oz effect. Where it's like you're in this bubble of unreality, and to me, even though I've never experienced like a UFO contact, but I would love to.
Yeah,
that's to me what I imagine it seems like a great way to describe it. Where you're in this little dome things are off. It's
really the looking glass. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Jeff, this has been so much fun. You are an absolute scholar.
Thank you.
On Wisconsin. I was recommended to talk to you, and boy, you did not disappoint, my friend.
Yeah, Dean Bertram recommended me.
Yep. I love Dean.
Yeah, he's a fellow. He's an adoptive Wisconsinite. Via Australia, and we're happy to have him in the land of cheese and beer because he's a great guy, and his work with I call him the man who invented flying saucers because of his impending project, the man who invented flying saucers and the Shaver Mystery Short.
The Shaver Mystery Short is so good. Oh my God, I love it. Like, I'm a big fan of Dean's work, and he's such a good dude, passionate about these topics just like we are.
Absolutely.
Buddy, is there anything you would like to push, promote, talk more about your podcast? Like, how can we find more about Jeff?
Yeah, Wisconsin Legends Podcast is a great place to start. At Badgerland Legends on both Instagram and Facebook. Check me out there. Connect with me. If you have a younger reader, somebody between 5 and 11, the Wisconsin Legends for Kid book is available on Amazon. It's great. I actually wrote it for my daughter on our talks on her way to school. I wanted a way to relate some of these stories to her that weren't too scary. We have Dahmer, we have Geen, we have serial killers, we have UFO cults, but
tread lightly.
We also have space pancakes, and that was one of them. We talked about in that book. I talked about Rocky the Rock Lake Monster, and Chicken Alley, these spectral chickens that you can run into in a certain section. So if you want to hear more about that, pick up the book on Amazon, Wisconsin Legends for Kids.
Oh my God. Fantastic. You will find, I would love to link that in the show notes if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Oh, Jeff, this has been so much fun, buddy. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hooking up with you this summer and going to look at some weird stuff.
Absolutely.
Look, lunch will be on me, but I'm going to demand we start with an order of fried cheese curds because
no Wisconsin meal would be complete without a starter of cheese curds.
It's one of the few things in this world that just lives up to the hype. I mean,
absolutely.
It's the best fried piece of food you'll ever have.
If you visit Wisconsin and they don't have Wisconsin cheese curds on the menu, turn around, walk out, and find another place. You're in the wrong place, buddy.
I concur. Jeff, this has been too much fun, buddy. I really appreciate this.
Had a blast, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of Hi, Strangeness. Enjoy your dinners tonight. Peace.